Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Gemology for Schmucks. My name is Peter Nelson, and I'm here to guide you in everything you need to know about gemstones. Last week, I talked about the 3 musketeers that you absolutely need to know about in order to master cutting, or at least call yourself a cutter, in my opinion. This week, I'm going to tell you how I finally got up the guts to try recutting gemstones, which I believe is one of the most important skills that any new cutter can learn. The reason I believe it's one of the most important skills is because there are so many gemstones out in the market now that are gnarled and chewed up by time and abuse and all of those other things, or, just lousy craftsmanship from the beginning, that need to be recut to meet their full potential. And as the consumer becomes more and more in tune with what a beautiful or what a top-end cut gemstone looks like, they become more demanding. So the opportunity is there to take a stone that has great color and great potential and turn it into the dream gem of somebody out there in the world. And that's where I think there's more space for people these days. Going and searching out piles of rough and getting a good deal on that is not for the faint of heart. Evaluating rough is incredibly difficult. So this week I finally got up the guts to try and recut some step cuts, which is one of my personal favorites, and I feel like I'm pretty competent at it. But I've never done recutting before. I've never been taught to recut. So I'm kind of just figuring it out on my own. I've heard a couple of tips and tricks from other people, and so I'm just going to try those out and see what I can do with it. So today I'm going to tell you a bit about that process. I got 3 rings from my client. These are also vintage rings found in estate sales or pawn shops, etc. in the United States. So I took these 3 rings, got the stones taken out of the ring because frankly, you need to inspect the bottom side, the pavilion of the stone as well. And then I could inspect the stones to see what kind of condition they were in. These were all gnarled and chewed up by abusive owners. Okay, fine, they're just normal people living their average lives. But gemstones come in contact with a lot of abuse. And so what we see on these stones is a lot of abraded and chipped facet junctions. Some of them have also started to round. Maybe that's because of poor cutting in the first place, but time also will do that on its own. So what I did was I got my first stone dopped up, and this stone you can see right on the table has a very aggressive scratch. Very ugly, very unpleasant, and it also has another scratch right on the lower 2 steps of the crown. And so we're gonna have to take these out, and that's gonna take a fair amount of polishing. So what I did was I got it dopped up in this red dop wax, and then I had to level it out with the table to make sure that my dop was at least mildly centered and straight on with the lap. Now, the trick that I had heard to check whether or not your angle is correct with a stone without going and starting to, change that angle right away is to use this small mirror. So I got an adorable little Doraemon mirror at 7-Eleven and the nastiest, most unpleasant, but also cheapest toothpaste that I could possibly find. Lord knows I'm not putting it in my mouth. And then what I was told you do is you take that toothpaste and you put it on the stone, and then you check the angle that you've got your handpiece at with the mirror. That way, the flat, level surface of the mirror can register against the facet of the gemstone. If it's perfectly lined up, it'll wipe away clear and leave a straight, flat facet. There won't be any toothpaste. If it's not quite lined up, you'll still have a layer of toothpaste. So you have to go back and forth and check and edit the number on the handpiece, that angle that the handpiece is registered to, until you find an angle where it leaves a flat, even plane with no film of toothpaste. And from there, we go about trying to repolish the stone. Now, I haven't done this before. So what happened was I went to polish the table first because that humongous, egregious scratch was right there, and I figured why not start with the biggest, most horrible facet first? Because oftentimes it's easier to come back from an area that has a lot of surface area. As long as you get that angle correct, it slows things down because there's so much contact that if you do something a little bit off, you start to notice it before you go too far. Well, my logic was correct. It did slow things down. However, it was so slow that I ended up having to go back to my cutting lap and recut all of those surfaces. Somehow in my mind, way back in the day when I first started the vintage rings and first started with recutting stones or having other people recut stones, I was thinking, okay, just repolish this face. That should be easy and fast for you, right? I've since learned that that was an idiotic idea. Seems sound in principle, but I haven't been able to do it. If some of you are wiser in cutting and repolishing than I am, which is most of you, I'm sure, I would love to hear your thoughts if you would do this differently than me. Please tell me in the comments below. I'm so tired of the torture. And so after recutting all of those faces and realizing that, hey, the person that cut this the first time actually may have not done a great job, and they might have been freehanding it because their angles aren't straight and their meet points are not meet points. It's kind of like a staircase. So I go through and I fix all of that, writing down all of the numbers as I go, just like I did with cushions before. So I'm so glad that I mastered the cushion, or at least got competent in the cushion, before coming to do recutting. Because it's the exact same process. Check, record, check and record. And then I go back, recut it, and then I can repolish those same faces using the numbers that I've now become certain are the right angles and the right indexes. If you want to understand what these terms are, then go check out Justin's site, fastingapprentice.com, and you can learn all about it. But the nice thing is that because I did recut those facets, they came together nice and sharp again. They weren't all chewed up, and some of those junctions that were between 4 facets, that's 2 different tiers, those became nice, sharp, and pointy instead of chewed up and gnarled and rounded over, and it's just ugly. But now it's beautiful. Now, I am not a master at saving weight, but at the end of the day, when we're talking about recutting, there's always a list of priorities. What is your priority? Is your priority to save weight? Is your priority to improve the appearance of the stone? Is your priority to remove all of the chips and or scratches? Because you can't choose all of the things unless you are also willing to remove a certain amount of weight. If there's a chip over in the girdle, you have to bring in the girdle. That's going to cost you a lot of weight. If there's just a scratch on the table, that's going to cost you less weight. But going through this experience with 3 stones has really been a help for me, because now I have an idea that, okay, I just treat it exactly like I would a cushion, test and check and test and check, and the faster you speed up that process, the faster you get through the process. There is no set way, because I have to know how the original cutter cut the stone before I can go about recutting this stone. Fortunately, I don't have to use that much toothpaste. But after going through and correcting the meet points as much as I can without killing too much weight, and bringing that polish up to a nice, crisp polish, I now have 3 gemstones that fit back in the original ring just as they belong, looking fresh and new, in no way looking like a stone of antiquity, but looking like something that's ready for you, should that ring be your style and size, etc. So to recap on the whole experience, I would say that what I learned was that recutting is actually harder than cutting from rough, in my opinion. Rough, you get so many choices that you get to make. With recutting, you have a very limited set of choices. If you want to keep the most weight, you need to follow to within very fine tolerances. If you want a closed window, then you have to shrink that girdle in certain ways. So the freedom is not there. But you get to take something that may have been a total reject and bring it into a prima donna status. Why not? And now 3 rings that might have just gotten smashed by some pawn shop owner who wants to sell the gold have now been resurrected into over 10-carat aquamarines, at least 2 of them. The other one ended up being a topaz. And let that be a lesson to all of us. Topaz too, along with glass and synthetic spinel and perhaps some other things, can look exactly like aquamarine. In fact, when I was cutting it, I was noticing that it was scratching in a different way, and I was going, hold on, there's a devil in these details. Because in the process of cutting, I've also found that crystals feel quite differently as you're cutting them, and polish quite differently. And I've never seen that thing, that kind of demonic scratch mark, like the claws straight out of hell. That doesn't happen in beryl. And I've cut a fair amount of beryl at this point. Oh, but topaz. Oh, the topaz. Anyway, so if you'd like to get in touch with me directly, please head over to gemshepherd.com, where you can read blogs about investing in gemstones and gemology. Otherwise, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, leave me a comment down below, and until next time, bye-bye.